Hey everybody, how's it going? Hello, boys. We'll be getting started here in a moment. Um, I do want to let you guys know ahead of time. My attention is not going to be divided. However, I am trying to get some stuff done before the morning on RuneScape. For those of you that don't play it, WEXP starts tomorrow, and I have to prep a couple more things. So, yeah. But aside from that, basically what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be finishing, or at least I can't say finishing, trying to finish. The pasta box stuff. I think I've come to the conclusion that I just want to do 2 illustrations this month. So I've got a lot of other stuff to do. I don't want to bog myself down. Go ahead and kick us over to the normal stream screen. Okay. Oh, by the way, I also, on top of everything, got a, you probably can't see it super well. I'll show you guys in a bit if you guys want to stick around. Once my beard dries, I'm going to have to oil it. But I got a haircut, so nothing like major, but why? Okay. So here's what we currently have for the animation itself. I've obviously still got to work on it a good bit. Let it go through one more time. And this is the lighting we're working with. I may change things a little bit here and there. But I'm relatively happy for the most part with the lighting for this. I think my Alright, starting again. Yes, this is effectively what we're working with right now. I think it looks pretty damn cool. But, yeah. I think before we move too much further into the animation, I do want to continue working on the UV, or not the UV, the texture for the TV. And then I think once we get that sorted out and taken care of, then we should be good to go. And then I can continue. By the way, this is obviously not all the animation that we're doing, but I would argue this is like the block based on what we had already accomplished. I don't think I need to. Oh, there we go. Yeah. I was curious whether or not I could do frame by frame. Turns out I can. Yeah, this is effectively what we got right now. Pretty cool. And then again, here's the current lighting that we have going. So we are going to keep this open. However, we are going to move on to do the TV before we get too much further into the animation. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of want to do, I kind of want to listen to more creepypasta as we're doing this, because I really enjoyed doing that. That was pretty fun for me. If anybody objects to that, let me know. Let me see if I have this already saved. If not, I'll have to save it. Wait, did I even, I don't even think I have UVs for this laid out. My bet would probably be no. Give me just 1 second, guys. I'm gonna make sure I've got this. And check some. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Okay. I don't think I have these laid out yet, though. Yeah, just a normal unwrap doesn't work. Then I'll just do it. Really ugly. Okay. Cubic projection. I'm glad, if nothing else, the front face turned out fine. At the end of the day, I don't really need a whole lot more. Do I not have one splitting it? Okay. Sorry guys, I'll get it back. I'll start working on stuff that's on the screen here in just a moment. Okay, that should do a lot better. There we go. That should be much better. Here, I'm just gonna put it back on Blender for now until I get this done, because I don't want you guys having to look at a blank screen. I'm trying to get this stuff. All right, let's make a UV canvas UV grid. The grid. That. Give me just a moment, guys. I'm gonna look at the for this and make sure it works. Okay. Going on. Doing it on the other side. Actually, it's doing it on all sides. Obviously, it turned out good on that. If I can get this fixed, we're good to go. But obviously, if I can't. What's happening? Help? In fact, arguably. Yeah, let's put on something other than the fucking lo-fi. We'll have that for later, but right now I'm not feeling it. Let's listen to popular uploads for a bit, and then some of the other ones.
For the efficient, Lenovo Yoga.
Fuck off. You're not paying me. I don't want you doing shit on my.
Excerpt from local newspaper. Ominous unknown killer still at large. After weeks of killings, the ominous unknown killer is still on the rise. After little evidence has been found, a young boy states that he survived one of the killer's attacks and bravely tells his story. "I had a bad dream and woke up in the middle of the night," says the boy. "I saw that for some reason the window was open, even though I remember it being closed before I went to bed. I got up and shut it once more. Afterwards, I simply crawled under my covers and tried to go back to sleep. That's when I had a strange feeling, like someone was watching me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my bed. There, in the little ray of light illuminating from my curtains, were a pair of two eyes. These weren't regular eyes, they were dark, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black, and just plain out terrified me. That's when I saw his mouth, a long, horrendous smile that made every hair on my body stand up.
Mhm.
The figure stood there, watching me. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he said it. A simple phrase, but said it in a way only a madman could speak. "Go to sleep." I let out a scream. That's what sent him at me. He pulled out a knife, aimed at my heart, jumped on my bed. I fought him back. I kicked, I punched, I rolled around, trying to knock him off me. That's when my dad burst in with his 12-gauge shotgun. He aimed it at the man. He almost got him. But before he could pull the trigger, the man leapt out to the side. The man threw the knife in a Bowie knife style into my dad's shoulder. He let go of the gun. The man probably would have finished him off if one of the neighbors hadn't alerted the police. They drove into the parking lot and ran towards the door. The man turned and ran down the hallway. I heard a smash, like glass breaking. As I came out of my room, I saw the window that was pointing towards the back of my house was broken. I looked out to see him vanish into the distance. I can tell you one thing. I'll never forget
Oh, I
that
think I
face.
see.
Those cold, evil eyes. That psychotic smile. They'll never leave my head. Police still are on the lookout for this man. If you see anyone that fits the description in the story, please contact your local police department. Jeff and his family had moved into the new neighborhood. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, and they thought it would be best to live in one of those fancy neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother Lou couldn't complain, though. A new, better house. What was not to love? As they were getting unpacked, one of their neighbors came by. "Hello," she said. "I'm Barbara. I live across the street from you. Well, I just wanted to introduce myself and to introduce my son." She turned around and called her son over. "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi and ran back to play in his yard. "Well," said Jeff's mom, "I'm Margaret. This is my husband Peter, and our two sons Jeff and Lou." They each introduced themselves, and Barbara invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and his brother were about to object when their mother said that they would love to. Jeff went up to his mom. "Mom, why did you invite us to some kid's party? They haven't noticed. I'm not some dumb kid." "Jeff," says his mom, "we just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. Now we're going to that party, and that's final." Jeff started to talk, but stopped himself, knowing that he can't do anything. Whenever his mom says something, it's final. He walks up to his room and plops down on his bed. He sits there looking at the ceiling when suddenly he gets a weird feeling. Not so much a pain, but a weird feeling. He dismisses it as if some random feeling. He hears his mom calling him down to get his stuff, and he walks down to get it. The next day, Jeff walked down the stairs to get breakfast and get ready for school. As he sat there, eating his breakfast, he once again got that feeling. This time it was stronger. It gave him a slight tugging pain, but he once again dismissed it. As he and Lou finished breakfast, they walked down to the bus stop. They sat there waiting for the bus, and then, all of a sudden, some kid on a skateboard jumps over them, only inches above their laps. They both jump back in surprise. "Hey, what the hell, kid?" The kid landed and turned back to them. He kicked his skateboard up and caught it with his hand. He wears an Aeropostale shirt and ripped blue jeans. "Well, well, well, looks like we got some new meat." Suddenly 2 other kids appeared. One is super skinny and the other is huge. "Well, since you're new here, I'd like to introduce ourselves. Over there's Keith." Jeff and Lou look at the skinny kid. He has a dopey face that you would expect a sidekick to have. "And he's Troy." They look over at the fat kid. Talk about a tub of lard. This kid looks like he hadn't exercised since he was crawling. "And I," says the kid, "am Randy. Now, for all the kids in this neighborhood, there's a small price of bus fare, if you catch my drift." Lou stands up, ready to punch the light out of the kid's eyes, when his 2 friends pull a knife up at him. "I had hoped you'd be more cooperative, but it seems we must do things the hard way." The kid walks up to Lou and takes his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff gets that feeling again. Now it's truly strong, a burning sensation. He stands up, but Lou gestures him to sit down. Jeff ignores it and walks up to the kid. "Listen here, you little punk. Give back my bro's wallet or else." Randy puts the wallet in his pocket and pulls a knife. "Oh? And what you gonna do?" Just as he finishes his sentence, Jeff pops the kid in the nose. Kid reaches for his face. Jeff grabs the kid's wrist and breaks it. Randy screams and Jeff grabs the knife from his hand. Troy and Keith rush him, but Jeff's too quick. He throws Randy to the ground. Keith lashes out at him, but Jeff ducks and stabs him in the arm. Keith drops his knife and falls to the ground screaming. Troy rushes him too, but Jeff doesn't even need the knife. He punches Troy straight in the stomach. He goes down. As he falls, he pukes all over the place. Lou can do nothing but look in amazement at Jeff. "Jeff, how did you..." That's all he says. They see the bus coming, and know they'd be blamed for the whole thing, so they start running as fast as they can. As they run, they look back and see the bus driver rushing over to Randy and them. As Jeff and Lou make it to school, they don't dare tell what happens. All they do is sit and listen. Lou just thought of that as his brother beating up a few kids, but Jeff knew it was more. It was something scary. As he got that feeling, he felt how powerful it was, the urge to just hurt someone. He didn't like how it sounded, but he couldn't help but feel happy. He felt that strange feeling go away and stay away for the entire day of school, even as he walked home due to the whole thing near the bus stop. And how now he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore. He felt happy. When he got home, his parents asked him how his day was. He says, in a somewhat ominous voice, "It was a wonderful day." Next morning, he heard a knock at the front door. He walks down to find 2 police officers at the door, his mother looking back at him with an angry look. "Jeff, these officers tell me that you attacked 3 kids, that it wasn't a regular fight, and that they were stabbed? Stabbed, son." Jeff's gaze fell to the floor, showing his mother that it was true. "Mom, they were the ones who pulled the knives on me and Lou." "Son," says one of the cops, "we found 3 kids, 2 stabbed, 1 having a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses proving that you fled the scene. Now what does that tell us?" Jeff knew it was no use. He could say him and Lou had been attacked, but there was no proof it was not them who attacked first. They couldn't say that they weren't fleeing, because, truth be told, they were. So, Jeff couldn't defend himself or Lou. "Son, call down your brother." Jeff couldn't do it, since it was him who beat up all 3 of the kids. "Sir, it was me. I was the one who beat up those kids. Lou tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The cop looked at his partner. They both nodded. "Well, kid looks like a year in juvie." "Wait," says Lou. We all looked up to see him holding a knife. The officers pulled their guns and locked them on Lou. It was me. I beat up those little punks. Have the marks to prove it. He lifted up his sleeve to reveal cuts and bruises, as if he were in a struggle. Son, just put down the knife, said the officer. Lou held up the knife and dropped it on the ground, put his hands up and walked over to the cops. No, Lou, it was me. I did it. Jeff had tears running down his face. Huh, poor bro trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away. The police led Lou out to the patrol car. Lou, tell them it was me. Tell them I was the one who beat up those kids. Lou's mother put her hand on Jeff's shoulder. Jeff, please, you don't have to lie. We know it's Lou. You can stop. Jeff watched helplessly as the cop's car sped off with Lou inside. A few minutes later, Jeff's dad pulls into the driveway, seeing Jeff's face and knowing something's wrong. Son, what is it? Jeff can't answer. His vocal cords are strained from crying. Instead, Jeff's mother walks his father inside to break the bad news to him. As Jeff weeps in the driveway, after an hour or so, Jeff walks back into the house, seeing his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He can't look at them. He can't see how they think of Lou when it was his fault. He just goes to sleep, trying to get the whole thing off his mind. 2 days go by, with no word from Lou at JDC. No friends to hang out with. Nothing but sadness and guilt. That is until Saturday, when Jeff is woke up by his mother, with a happy, sunny face. Jeff, it's the day, she says as she opens the curtains and lets light flood into Jeff's room. What's today? Says Jeff as he stirs awake. Why, it's Billy's party. Jeff is now fully awake.
Hey Alex, we're listening to
Mom,
Creepypasta right now.
You're joking, right? You don't expect me to go to some kid's party
Oh, here,
after...
let me turn this off right now.
There was a long pause. Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the past few days. Now, get dressed. Jeff's mother walks out of the room and down to get herself ready. Jeff fights himself
I
to
guess,
get up.
hold up.
He picks up a random shirt, pair of jeans.
Hey, thanks for
walks
the
down
house,
the
man.
stairs.
I guess you weren't able to VC with me earlier. I'm not gonna join somebody else's VC to talk about stuff like that. I'll be honest, you kind of annoyed me with the way you responded to whether or not you were busy.
He sees his mother and father all dressed up. His mother in a dress, his father in a suit. He thinks why they would ever wear such fancy clothes to go to a kid's party. Son, is that all you're gonna wear? Says Jeff's mother. Better than wearing too much, he says. His mother pushes down the feelings to yell at him and hides it with a smile. Jeff, we may be overdressed, but this is how you go if you want to make an impression, says his father. Jeff grunts and goes back up to his room. I don't have any fancy clothes, he yells down the stairs. Just pick something, says his mother. He looks around his clothes.
Well, that's not really the point, whether it was your VC or not. I'm not going to jump into somebody else's conversation with you to talk to you about stuff that doesn't pertain to them. I mean, it's fine if you weren't trying to, but I mean, typically when I ask you if you're free and you say depends, typically that means depending on what you're wanting to waste my time with.
Closet for what he would call fancy.
Where the hell did the thing
He finds a pair
go?
of black dress pants he had for special occasions
That's
and
where
an
it went.
undershirt. He can't find a shirt to go with it, though. He looks around and finds only striped and patterned shirts, none of which go with dress pants. Finally, he finds a white hoodie. It's lying on a chair and puts it on. He walks downstairs to find his parents are all ready. You're wearing that? They both say. His mother looks at her watch. Oh, no time to change. Let's just go, she says as she herds Jeff and his father out the door. They
Where the hell
cross the
did
street
this
over to
go?
Barbara and Billy's
Jesus.
house.
Okay, it's
They knock on the
desktop
door,
file.
and it appears Barbara, just like my parents, way overdressed. As they walk inside, all we see is adults. No kids. The kids are out in the yard. Jeff, how about you go out and meet some of the kids? Says Barbara. Jeff walks outside to the yard full of kids, and they're running around in weird cowboy costumes and shooting each other with plastic guns. He might as well be standing in a Toys R Us. Suddenly, a kid comes up to him and hands him a toy gun and a hat. Hey, mister, you want to play? He says. No, kid. I'm way too old for this stuff. The kid looks at him with that weird puppy dog face. Please? Says the kid. Fine, says Jeff.
Okay. That's not what I was aiming at when I said that. I meant something like depending on time length you needed me for. Well, I mean that's again like if you're not free, then just say you're not free. I was in the middle of something. I can talk about that thing later Sunday if you're available. That's fine. I'll let you know. Let me know when you're free.
He puts on the hat and starts to pretend shoot at the kids. At first he thinks it's totally ridiculous, and then he starts to actually have fun. But it's the first time he's done something that takes his mind off of Lou, so he plays with the kids for a while, until he hears a noise. It's a weird, rolling noise. Then it hits him. Just as it does, Randy, Troy, and Keith all jump over the fence on their skateboards. Jeff drops the fake gun and rips off the hat. Randy looks at Jeff with burning hatred. Hello? Jeff, is it? We have some unfinished business. Jeff sees the bruised nose on his face. I think we're even. I beat the shit out of you, and you got my brother sent to JDC. Oh no, I don't go for even. I go for winning. You may have kicked our asses that one day, but not today. As he said that, Randy rushes Jeff. They both fall to the ground. Randy punches Jeff in the nose, and Jeff grabs him by the ears and headbutts him. Jeff pushes Randy off of him, and both rise to their feet. Kids were screaming, parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith both pull guns out of their pockets. No one interrupts or guts will fly, they say. Randy pulls a knife on Jeff and stabs him in the shoulder. Jeff screams and falls on his knees. Randy starts kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, though, Jeff grabs his foot and twists it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff stands up, walks towards the back door. Troy grabs him, though. Need some help? He picks Jeff up by the back of his collar and throws him through the patio door. As Jeff tries to stand, he is kicked down to the ground. Randy repeatedly starts kicking Jeff until he starts to cough up blood. Come on, Jeff, fight me! He picks Jeff up and throws him into the kitchen. Randy sees a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashes the glass over Jeff's head. Fight! He throws Jeff back into the living room. Come on, Jeff! Look at me! Jeff glances up, his face riddled with blood. I was the one who got your brother sent to JDC, and now you're just gonna sit there and let him rot in there for a whole year? You should be ashamed. Jeff stands up. Oh, finally you stand and fight. Jeff is now on his feet, blood and vodka on his face. Once again he gets that strange feeling, the one in which he hasn't felt for a while. Finally, he's up, says Randy as he runs at Jeff. And that's when it happens. Something inside Jeff snaps. His psyche is destroyed. All rational thinking is gone. All he can do is kill. He grabs Randy and pile drives him into the ground. He gets on top of him and punches him straight in the heart. The punch causes Randy's heart to stop. Randy's gasping for breath. Jeff hammers down on him, punch after punch. Blood gushes from Randy's body until he takes one final breath and dies. Everyone's looking at Jeff now. Parents, the crying kids, even Troy and Keith. Although they easily break from their gaze and point their guns at Jeff. Jeff sees the guns trained on him and runs for the stairs. As he runs, Troy and Keith let out fire on him, each shot missing. Jeff runs up the stairs. He hears Troy and Keith follow up from behind. As they let out their final round of bullets, Jeff ducks into the bathroom. He grabs the towel rack and rips it off the wall. Troy and Keith race up, knives ready. Troy swings his knife at Jeff, who backs away, and bangs the towel rack against Troy's face. Troy goes down hard, and now all that's left is Keith. He's more agile than Troy, though, and ducks when Jeff swings the towel rack. He drops the knife, grabs Jeff by the neck. He pushes him against the wall. A thing of bleach falls down on top of us from the top shelf. It burnt both of them. They both started to scream. Jeff wiped his eyes as best he could. He pulled back the towel rack, swung it straight into Keith's head. As he lay there, bleeding to death, he lets out an ominous smile. "What's so funny?" asks Jeff. Keith pulled out a lighter and switches it on. "It's funny," he says, "is that you're covered in bleach and alcohol." Jeff's eyes widen as Keith throws the lighter at him. As soon as the flame made contact with him, the flames ignite the alcohol in the vodka. While the alcohol burned him, the bleach bleached his skin. Jeff let out a terrible screech as he caught on fire. He tried to roll out the fire, but it was no use. The alcohol made him a walking inferno. He ran down the hall, fell down the stairs. Everyone started screaming as they saw Jeff, now a man on fire, drop to the ground nearly dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and other parents trying to extinguish the flame. And that's when he passed out. When Jeff woke up, he had a cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything. He felt the cast on his shoulders, stitches all over his body. He tried to stand up, but he realized that there was some tube in his arm. When he tried to get up, it fell out. The nurse rushed in. "I don't think you can get out of bed just yet," she said as she put him back into the bed and reinserted the tube. Jeff sat there with no vision, no idea of what his surroundings were. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked. Jeff couldn't answer, though. His face was covered. He was unable to speak. "Oh, honey, I have great news. After the witnesses told the police that Randy confessed of trying to attack you, they decided to let Lou go." That made Jeff almost bolt up, stopping halfway, remembering the tube coming out of his arm. "He'll be out by tomorrow. Then you two will be able to be together again." Jeff's mother hugged Jeff, says her goodbyes. The next couple of weeks were those where Jeff was visited by his family. Then came the day where his bandages were to be removed. His family were all there to see what he would look like. As the doctors unwrapped the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage holding the cover over his face was almost removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulled the cloth, letting the rest fall from Jeff's face. Jeff's mother screamed at the sight of his face. Lou and Jeff's dad stare, awestruck at his face. What happened to my face?" Jeff said. He rushed out of bed and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of distress. His face. It's horrible. His lips were burnt to a deep shade of red. His face was turned into a pure white color. His hair singed from brown to black. He slowly put his hands to his face. It had a sort of leathery feel to it now. He looked back at his family, then back at the mirror. "Jeff," said Lou, "it's not so bad." "Not bad?" said Jeff. "It's perfect." His family were equally surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably. His parents noticed that his left eye and hand were twitching. Jeff, are you okay?" "Okay? I've never felt more happy. Look at me. His face goes perfectly with me." He couldn't stop laughing. He stroked his face, feeling it, looking at it in the mirror. What caused this? He may recall that when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind, some sanity snapped. Now he was left as a crazy killing machine. That is, his parents didn't know. "Doctor," said Jeff's mom, "is my son all right, in the head?" "Oh, yes, this is typical behavior for a patient that's had a very large amount of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here. We'll give him some psychological testing." "Oh, thank you, doctor." Jeff's mother went over to Jeff. "Jeff, sweetie, it's time to go." Jeff looks away from the mirror. His face still formed into a crazy smile. "Okay, Mom." Jeff's mom took him by the shoulder and took him to get his clothes. "This is what he came in," says the lady at the desk. Jeff's mom looked down to see the black dress pants and white hoodie her son wore. Now they were clean of blood and now stitched together. Jeff's mother led him to his room and made him put his clothes on. And then they left, not knowing that this was their final day of life. That night, Jeff's mother woke to a sound coming from their bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrendous sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile into his cheeks. "Jeff, what are you doing?" asked his mother. Jeff looked over to his mother. I couldn't help but... I couldn't help... I couldn't keep smiling, Mommy. It hurt after a while. Now I can smile forever." Jeff's mother noticed his eyes, ringed in black. "Jeff, your eyes!" His eyes were bordered by black, seemingly never closing. I couldn't see my face. I got tired and my eyes started to close. I burned out the eyelids so I could forever see myself, my new face. Jeff's mother slowly started to back away, seeing that her son was going insane. "What's wrong, Mommy? Aren't I beautiful?" Yes, son," she said. Yes, you are. Let me go get Daddy so he can see your face." She ran into the room and shook Jeff's dad awake from his sleep. Honey, get the gun. She stopped as she saw Jeff in the doorway holding the knife. "Mommy, you lied." That's the last thing they heard as Jeff rushed them with the knife, gutting both of them. His brother Lou woke up, startled by some noise. He didn't hear anything else, so he just shut his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. As he was on the border of slumber, he got the strangest feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. He slowly raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Lou. Lou thrashed here and there, trying to escape Jeff's grip. "Shh, I said. Just go to sleep." The young woman was tied to the chair, ropes binding her arms and legs to the sturdy furniture. A gag was
Okay, we're gonna skip this. Oh, I see what's happening. It's not
placed around.
relevant video as.
We are fascinating.
Yes, I am.
It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son, James, was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends. But he's always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it could be that he was talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single dad, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went out into the backyard,
I was a bit confused because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. "James! It's time to come inside!" I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who are you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked up for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured some milk and continued to pry, as any good father would. "Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you, ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked. James stared at me for a moment before replying. "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken aback by what he said. "Oh? That's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with striped socks. He always smiles." I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it was normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. Probably just a phase. The rest of the day went as usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed, tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of a run-down amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched into their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't any living thing in sight. And then suddenly I began to hear music play. The sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on a squeak box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to the circus tent almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining on the center of the big top. As I walked towards the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. And the music stopped right before its climax. And suddenly, the light shot on. The intensity of the light was practically blinding. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared. And another? And another. There was a dozen of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, and all I could do was watch as the haunting figures drew near me. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one, I noticed that they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their bodies, others were severely burned, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. As the children tore me apart and I faded away, all I could hear was laughter. Horrible, evil, awful laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on the top of my nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woken up early and put these here. I gathered up the toys, made my way over to James's room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back in his toy box, headed out to the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him breakfast. He was quiet, seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep very well. I decided to ask him about the toys. And James, honey, did you put the toys in Dad's room this morning? His eyes shot up at me for a moment, and then quickly glanced down at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room." James nodded and finished up his breakfast, then decided to go out and play in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room and must have dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit! I need to go check on James. I was a bit worried that it had been over 2 hours and I hadn't checked on him. I stepped out into the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. Oh, I was getting nervous, so I called him out. James! James, where are you? Just then, I heard a giggle coming from the front yard. I rushed through the gate and around the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you to stay in the back? James, what are you eating? James looked up at me and then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies in all colors. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James just stared at me, not speaking. James, tell Dad who gave you that candy. James hung his head low and said, "Laughing Jack gave it to me." My heart sunk. I knelt down and looked him in the eye. James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He's not real. Now, this is a very serious situation. I need to know who gave you that candy. I could see my son's eyes tearing up. But Dad, Laughing Jack did give me the candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James had never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy and throw the rest away. James appeared to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual and decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly, I was awoken by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown to the floor. Our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's room, followed by loud crashes. I quickly grabbed the knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with a
Sorry, I wasn't
speed
expecting that
only
to
a
be that
father
loud.
whose child was in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed to the floor, and my poor son was in his bed crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine stained the sheets. I scooped up my child and ran out of the house, went next door to Tom and Linda's house, and luckily they were still awake. They let me use the phone to call the police. It didn't take them long to arrive, and I explained what happened. They looked at me as if I was crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was the dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape, when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew it wasn't true. All the doors were locked. None of the windows were open. Whatever was in my house didn't come from outside. The next day, James stayed inside. I didn't want him to leave my sight. I went to the garage, found my old baby monitor, and set it up in his room. If anything comes into his room tonight, I was going to be able to hear it. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife from the drawer, put it on my nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. And soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him that I wouldn't let anything hurt him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, turned on the nightlight, and before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but after a few hours I felt myself drifting off. my baby would be safe for the night, and I needed to sleep. And just as I laid my head down on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor that I had put on my nightstand. At first it sounded like interference, like the kind a radio would make. Then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard it. The laugh from my nightmare, that horrible laugh. I sprung up from the bed and grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James's room and creaked the door open. I tried the light switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step in and I could feel the warm, thick liquid on my feet. And suddenly, James's nightlight came on and I could see... I could see the absurd horror laid out in front of me. James's body was nailed up on the wall. The nails pierced through his hands and feet, and his chest was cut wide open, and his organs hung down to the floor, and his eyes and tongue had been removed along with most of his teeth, and I was disgusted. I could hardly believe that this was my baby boy. And then I heard it again. That soft, desperate moan. God. James was still alive. My baby, my poor boy, in such pain, could barely cling to life, and I ran across the room and I vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a horrible cackle coming from behind me, and I spun around, and while I was still wiping bile from my mouth, then out of the shadows emerged the fiend responsible for the horror. Laughing Jack. His ghost-white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, jagged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all. It almost looked like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque. His long arms hung down past his waist. The way he was poised made him look almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a sickening laugh as if to let me know that he was pleased with my reaction to his work. I turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more at the horrific sight that he laid out. That was enough to shake me from my terror, and I snapped, "Get away from him, you bastard!" I rushed at the monster, raised the knife above my head, and stabbed down at him. But as soon as the knife touched him, he disappeared like a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through him and pierced James' still beating heart, splashing the warm blood on my face. No. What have I done? My baby. I've killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees. I couldn't hear. I could hear sirens in the distance growing louder, and my boy, my sweet baby boy. I promised that Daddy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived and found me in front of my son, still wielding the knife covered in my baby's blood, and the trial was short. Insanity. I was placed in Ferropolis House for the Criminally Insane, where I had been for the past 2 months. It's not bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk to the orderlies about it in the morning.
Let us help you experience the wonders of the world.
You've heard of Smile Dog, right? That terrifying picture of a husky smiling and in a demonic way? Yeah, that one. Well, I was looking at internet memes and scary stories a few months ago. I stumbled across an urban legend video which I found interesting. I watched the video and it told of a few basic facts about spontaneous human combustion and sleep paralysis. The video also contained a couple of screamers to kill the mood a little. The end story was of Smile Dog. It simply presented the picture and told the viewer the legend. I researched it a bit more and found it to be terrifying but quite cool. I began talking about it to my friends in school the next day. It turned out something of a common interest. People would often use it jokingly, like in a history lesson our teacher told us. He collapsed on the floor. My friend leaned towards me and said, "I guess he saw Smile Dog." And it would often make us laugh. We then found other stories such as Red Mist or Squidward's suicide, Candle Cove. Then we dropped the subject of Smile Dog for a while after that. In our school, we often talked to this boy, and his name was Michael. He was a strange child. He never spoke to us, and he would often keep to himself. He had no idea where he would be at lunchtime. He wouldn't be hanging out with us, but we found it not to be of our concern. He'd often leave lessons early to visit a hospital, as he was a rather sickly child. He told me only a few of his afflictions, the most noticeable being epilepsy and schizophrenia. He never showed signs of these, though. If he mentioned them, he would often laugh it off and dismiss them. He approached me one day and inquired about Smile Dog. I replied, "Oh, that thing? Yeah, it's obviously fake."
Can I see it?
I didn't save it or anything.
But
Oh, just look it up, okay? I was busy with homework at the time, and when people try to talk to me, I'm rather irritable. He walked off without looking back. But I didn't see Michael the next day. He was supposed to be in a few of our lessons, but he wasn't there. Nobody, not even the teachers, knew where he was. It was after our first lesson. I was called into the headmaster's office. The headmaster sat me down in front of his desk and told me, "Your friend Michael has been instated to a mental institution. He apparently saw something scary, and he kept having visions of it. Have you any idea what that might be?" And I immediately remembered Smile Dog. Yes, sir." The headmaster immediately brought up his computer, and I was faced with the Google search engine. I changed the search to images and typed in Smile Dog. I showed the headmaster the full, unedited image of Smile Dog. "Oh my," he said, and told me that Michael would probably want to see me. He immediately arranged for transport for me to the mental institute. I entered the colossal building with the headmaster, where we were stopped by a doctor. He said, "Michael only wants his friend, I'm afraid." The headmaster gave me a bewildered look, and I said, "That's fine. I'll see you in a few minutes." I strolled down the large, intimidating corridor and reached room 204. The room had a padded floor, a wall, and a light. No windows except a minuscule viewing slot through the door. I walked in and almost vomited. Michael was lying face down in the middle of the room with his hands still gripped tight on his neck. He was dead. There was a hastily scrawled note left next to him. It was for me.
Josh, I saw that smile dog picture that you showed me. It's everywhere. No matter what we do, it can't be stopped. It appears in the brightest moments of your life. It'll always be marching, never moving. It will not go away. Why did they have to put me in this room? Why do I have to be trapped in this godforsaken room? I had no escape. No matter how much I kicked off, the doctors wouldn't believe me. This was the only way out, I guess. But what if the dog is still there during death? When you're weak or incapacitated, it'll drag you down to hell from where it once came. This is the reality, Josh. Do not ever mention Smile Dog to anyone ever again. Sincerely, Michael.
I pocketed the note and alerted the doctors. Upon further inspection of his body, his hand was blocking a horrifying, vicious bite into his neck. The teeth marks matched that of a dog's. A Siberian husky. I keep going over and over that note in my head. I can't believe it. He was such a nice boy, and I regret every bad thing I ever said to him. Why did it have to end this way for him? There's a small part in my head saying that I'm responsible, and another portion of my head believes that this is all just fake, and I should have been more aware of Michael's afflictions. The only trouble is, I'm running out of options to believe here. And I didn't know that schizophrenia was contagious. But I keep seeing that damn little dog in the corner of my eye everywhere I go. It's starting to get on my nerves. Wait a minute. Is that? No. I hear panting and scratching on my door. Let me go investigate. I'll be back in a second. Spread the word.
Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card at the end of your first year.
The kids coming in.
Have you ever thought there was something that the creators of Chuck E. Cheese were hiding from us all? Have you ever found something to be off about the place? Even the creepy robotic mascots that danced on stage. I didn't until I found out the truth about Chuck E. Cheese. It all began on the first time I had ever visited the place. I was around the age of 5 or 6, so I of course was pretty ecstatic to go. Seeing all those commercials of kids eating pizza and running around without a care in the world, on the arcade games and on the play structure, made me almost get down on my hands and knees to plead and beg my mom to take me. After finally getting her to break, she took me. I was the happiest kid in the world. My mom drove me over just a few hours before evening, so maybe around 4:30 or so. I almost knocked over the woman at the door who gave you the little stamp on your hand, and running ahead of my mom and bursting through those doors like a maniac child. Eventually, I was stamped and literally screeching as I ran around to all the games and play sets. After a bit, I stumbled on over to a game, like whack-a-mole, but with sharks. Right by that staff-only room. One shark-whacking minute later, I'd won the game, and before I could squeal in success and collect my tickets, my ears caught the sound of something very strange going on near the staff-only room. I could hear someone say, "Test number 15 on mutated rat results in angered behavior, such as throwing desk and scientist at the wall." I then began to wonder what in the world they could be talking about. Maybe they were making a new game. Being so young, I had no idea at all what was actually going on in there. So being curious and feeling a bit interested, I pressed myself against the door and listened in as carefully as a 6-year-old could. I could hear them snapping at each other. Things like, "What are we going to do with the beast? And get it away from me!" A mumbled shout poured over whoever was in there, and replied with a louder, "We can't just kill that thing!" The talking stopped. I blinked for a second, and pressed myself closer on the door. I realized that this was a very bad mistake as the door opened from my weight against it. I slipped in, going from leaning on the door to falling face flat on the ground of the staff room. Immediately, footsteps trampled over to me, hands grabbed at my arms. I was up like a light in a few seconds. And still, I don't know what the hell they did to do that. I woke up slowly, my eyes feeling heavy and my body feeling weak in some kind of interrogation room. A tall man with a serious expression wearing the cleanest white lab coat I'd ever seen began walking towards me out of the blue. Like he knew I'd be awake, like he knew I was awake. His voice was deep, and it was scratchy from what I could tell. When he began to speak. You know, don't you? He said. I was a 6-year-old half knocked out at a Chuck E. Cheese, so I didn't know what they expected from me. I babbled for a second, letting my tongue function correctly. "What?" I replied dumbly, blinking lazily. He grabbed my arm, making the static feeling intensify somehow. He pulled me a bit, making me whine, though I quickly shut my toddler trap when a loud banging on the door echoed throughout the room. Naturally, me being so young and clueless, I screamed, thrashing around. The man let go of me and snapped at me to shut my mouth. Forgetting about almost everything, I thrashed around some more. Slipping out of my chair, I kicked my legs going into the corner of the room. I screamed again, banging my foot against something, making a loud metal clang against my foot. I twisted around and whined down at an air vent. I kicked it again out of scared, hot anger. With another loud scream and clang, the metal front door popped off. Again letting out a shriek when I heard the man stomping towards me. Out of the noise of clawing metal and banging, I scooted inside, spitting at him. I was scared half to death. I mean, what was I doing here? Where was my mom? He swiped at me for a second, but quickly pulled his hand back. There was another loud bang, and the man stepped back. Using my tiny little hands, I grabbed the air vent's door and pulled it back, pressing it on. Just in time, a piercing hiss was followed by a shout from the stranger, and the loudest bang on the door. I clawed back, scooting back into the vent. I had to leave. Even being so young, I knew that I was in trouble. I hastily turned around with a bit of struggle, slowly crawling down the vent. A loud manly scream echoed through the vent, being followed by more. They were in unison with the sound of cracking. Terror, which I now know was flesh and bone from the stranger. I got out as fast as I could. A small light was around the corner after a few minutes, and I stomped on it. The vent easily popped open. They really weren't paying attention to how tightly they were screwed on, were they? My feet stumbled as I climbed out, but were soon trampling to where I saw my mom last. She was still there with a worried expression on her face. I ran up to her, hugged her tight, my eyes now glazed with wet, hot tears. I wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. I want to go home, I whined and complained. My mom gave me a strange look, but put a finger on my cheek. You must be tired, sweetheart, she cooed, picking me up. I clenched my small fist, holding tightly onto her shirt. We walked out of the building, me being oh so lovingly carried to the car. A distant whir of sirens became louder and louder, and police cars pulled into the large parking lot and skidded to a halt in front of the once amazing and fun Chuck E. Cheese. My mother almost ran into the car and quickly buckled me into the car seat. A couple hours later, home and safe that night, I walked out of my room to get some water before I went to bed. A habit of trying to procrastinate so I didn't have to sleep. And my mother was watching the news. The reporter talking about some kind of mutated rat coming out of Chuck E. Cheese and disappearing down the alleyway. So what happened to the real Chuck E. Cheese? God only knows. But I will never, and I repeat, never, go into any damn Chuck E. Cheese for as long as I live. And I know never to spy on the staff. The county morgue can be a pretty grim and depressing place, especially on a slow, boring day. Even the simplest thing as a routine autopsy can produce results so shocking that a seasoned mortician can have their lunch jump back into their throats. Before the doctor lay an average-height, lanky, pale man. The skin of his face is pulled impossibly tight from scarring. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, never able to close. His mouth is permanently ripped into a smile across his face. It could be argued that his killing spree has finally brought an end to him. The police finally closed a case of the most twisted mass murderer that the world has ever seen. Maybe karma stepped in and sealed his fate. All are true.
Homicide, plain and simple.
Stream 85 plus channel.
With a lot of protein powders, grit happens.
It's Christmas Eve in snowy 1800s England, and in a small house at the edge of town, there lived a lonely 7-year-old boy named Isaac. Isaac was a sad child with not a friend to his name. And most children were spending the time with their families and eagerly looking forward to opening the presents that were placed with care beneath a beautiful decorated Christmas tree. Little Isaac spent this most holy of nights alone in his cold, dusty attic room. Isaac's parents were very poor, but his mother was a strict crow of a woman who stayed at home and schooled Isaac. His father would work long hours down at the London harbour to support his family, though a large portion of his earnings went towards purchasing and consuming copious amounts of alcohol at the end of his shift. And sometimes he would come home drunk after being thrown out of every bar in London and shout at his beloved wife. Occasionally, he would escalate to violence, and he would beat her savagely. As it so happens, this particular night was one of those occasions. Isaac just remained quiet, quivering beneath his soiled bedsheets until the screaming and loud banging subsided. Once poor frightened Isaac was finally able to fall asleep, he'd dream of what it would be like to have a friend to play with. So maybe he could laugh and be happy like the other children of London. Luckily for little Isaac, this Christmas Eve marked a big change. When his abysmal loneliness caught the attention of a guardian angel, who then crafted a very special gift for the sad little London boy. As the sun rose on that Christmas morning, Isaac opened his eyes to find a strange wooden box sitting at the foot of his bed. With eyes widened in awe, he stared at the colorful little handcrafted box, wondering who had left it. He was not used to receiving gifts, especially toys. What little toys Isaac did have were ones he found abandoned in the street or washed up in the gutters. Isaac scooted up to the foot of his bed, in front of the mysterious box, and picked it up with both hands. The box was beautifully painted, in colorful styles, with carvings of happy clown faces on the side. There was a tag on the box that simply read, "For Isaac." On the top of the box was in engraved text. Isaac squinted his eyes as he sounded out the words.
Laughing Jack in a box.
He paused.
Laughing Jack in a box?
Isaac had heard of a jack-in-the-box, but never a laughing jack-in-a-box. His mind spun with curiosity as he grasped the box's metal crank. Isaac turned the crank, and the song "Pop Goes the Weasel" chimed in rhythm with the crank's gyrations. As the song came into its climax, Isaac sang along with the final verse. "Pop goes the weasel." But nothing happened. Isaac let out a sigh.
It's broken.
He placed the box back down on the edge of the bed and shuffled across his small, dusty room to his dresser, where he changed out of his soiled sleepwear and into his usual tattered clothes. Suddenly, Isaac heard a loud rattling sound coming from the bed behind him. He spun around to witness the wooden box violently shaking, and then without warning, the top of the box swung open, and a parade of colorful smoke and confetti bellowed out. Isaac rubbed his eyes in disbelief of what he had seen. As the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicolored clown man, with bright red hair, a swirly rainbow-colored cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat atop his raggedy and colorful clown outfit. The Technicolor clown spread his arms and excitedly announced,
"Come one, come all, whether big or small, to see the best clown of them all. The one, the only, Laughing Jack-in-a-Box."
Isaac's eyes lit up.
Who are you?
The colorful carny stepped down off the bed with a happy grin and said,
"I'm glad you asked. I am Laughing Jack, your new friend for life. I'm magical, I never get tired of playing, I'm a whiz at the accordion, and I adapt and develop with your own changing personality. In other words, whatever you like, I like."
Isaac looked up at the mysterious clown man.
We're friends?
Laughing Jack looked at the boy while cocking an eyebrow.
"Friends? We're best friends. I was specially created to be your not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac."
Isaac's jaw dropped.
You know my name?
"Of course I know your name. I know everything about you. So, now that the introductions are out of the way, how would you like to play a game of I Spy?"
Isaac grinned from ear to ear.
Really? We can play games? I'd love to.
He paused.
I can't. I have to go downstairs to see Mother for homeschooling and chores.
His smile faded into a look of disappointment. Jack placed his hand on Isaac's shoulder and with a warm smile said,
"It's okay. I'll be waiting right here for when you get back."
Isaac's smile returned as he looked up at his newfound friend. Just then he heard his mother's shrill voice calling him from downstairs.
Well, I gotta go. I'll see you after I'm done. Okay, Jack?
He said as he headed towards the door. Jack smiled.
"Absolutely, kiddo. Oh, and Isaac.
Isaac looked back at Jack, who gave him a wink and said,
You should wear that smile more often. It suits you."
Isaac grinned happily as he turned and walked out the door. All day, Isaac told his mother about the amazing, colorful clown man who came out of a magical box that appeared on the foot of his bed. His mother, however, did not believe a word of it, and finally, he persuaded his mother to follow him up to his room so that she could behold Laughing Jack for herself. They walked up the stairs, and Isaac swung the door open to his room.
See, Mother? He's right here.
Isaac paused as he scanned the room that contained neither magical dancing clown man nor mysterious wooden box. Isaac's mother was not amused. She gave Isaac a glare so menacing it made his knees weak and his stomach sick.
But Mother, he was...
Smack! Isaac's mother delivered unto him a swift hand smack across his face. His eyes began to tear up, and his lip began to quiver as he could feel himself about to break down.
You stupid, insolent child! How dare you lie to me about such childish idiocy? Who would want to be friends with a useless worm such as you? You shall remain in your room for the rest of the evening, and shall receive no dinner. Now, what do you say, you ungrateful wretch?
Isaac managed to swallow the knot in his throat in order to mutter a reply.
Thank you, Ma'am.
His mother glared down at him for a moment before leaving the room in disgust. Isaac kneeled over, burying his face in the side of his bed. Streams of tears ran down his cheeks as he began to weep.
What's wrong, kiddo?
Isaac looked over the edge of the bed where Laughing Jack was now suddenly sitting beside him.
Where were you?
Jack ran his hand through Isaac's hair to comfort him as he softly replied,
I was hiding. I can't let your parents see me, otherwise they won't let us play anymore.
Isaac wiped the tears from his eyes.
Look, kiddo, I'm sorry I had to hide, but I'll make it up to you. Because tonight, we can play games and have tons of fun.
Isaac looked up at his vibrant pal and silently nodded. His little smile began to form in the corner of his mouth. That night, Laughing Jack and Isaac played so many fun games. With a wave of his hand, Jack made all of Isaac's tin soldiers spring to life and march around the room. Isaac was amazed as he watched his toys move around the room on their own, and then Laughing Jack and Isaac told each other spooky ghost stories. Isaac asked Jack if he was a ghost, but Jack explained that he was more of a cosmic entity of sorts. At the end of the night, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an assortment of delicious candy. Isaac was in ecstasy when he popped the first colorful treat in his mouth, as it was his first time tasting something so sweet. Isaac had so much fun and laughed so hard that night that things seemed to be finally looking up for Isaac. At least, until the incident that occurred 3 months later. It was pleasantly warm and sunny in London that day, which was a bit of a rarity. So with the help of a certain not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac was able to finish his chores early and was allowed to go outside and play for a bit. Things started simple enough. The duo were back behind their house playing pirates when Isaac spotted the neighbor's cat sneaking into their garden.
Yag, we've got an enemy spy off the starboard bow!
Isaac yelled, captivated by fantasy and imagination.
Yo-ho! I'll get some, Captain Isaac!
Exclaimed his first mate Jack in his best hearty pirate accent. Laughing Jack's arm stretched out across the garden and snatched the unsuspecting feline, who began to struggle quite vigorously.
Don't let him get away, Jackie! I'll make ye walk the plank!
Isaac antagonized. Jack's grip on the cat tightened, and his arms grew and extended like anacondas, wrapping themselves around the wily feline as it struggled for dear life. Jack's arms just kept squeezing the animal, pressing the air out of its lungs. As the once dear household pet's eyes began to bulge out of their sockets, there came a loud snap. Jack quickly released the creature from his grip, and its lifeless furry husk thudded against the ground. It was a hushed silence as the two observed the cat's now twisted and mangled corpse. The silence was finally broken by an uproarious laughter coming from Isaac.
Wow, I guess cats really don't have 9 lives.
Isaac exclaimed, nearly teary-eyed from laughter.
Yeah, but won't you get in trouble if your mother finds your neighbor's cat dead in her garden?
Oh no, you're right. I'll just throw it back into the neighbor's yard.
Isaac panicked as he grabbed the nearby shovel and scooped up the broken cat cadaver before lobbing it over the fence back into the neighbor's yard. They quickly went back inside and up into Isaac's room. About an hour later, it came. The ear-piercing squawk of Isaac's mother shrieking his name from downstairs. Neither Jack nor Isaac said a word as he crept down the stairs alone to face whatever horrible fate was coming to him. Jack could hear much yelling from downstairs, but couldn't make out what was being said. After about 30 minutes, a teary-eyed Isaac ascended the stairs back into the room.
Well?
Jack said nervously. Isaac just stared at the ground as he spoke.
I tried to tell her it was you that hurt the cat. She didn't believe me. Said you weren't real.
Jack frowned, knowing this was all his fault. Isaac used his sleeve to wipe away any tears.
I'm being sent off to boarding school. I'm leaving tonight, and you can't come with me.
Laughing Jack's face turned to shock.
What? I can't come? Where will I go?
Isaac said nothing but pointed over to the beautiful, colored box from where his friend had originated.
Back in there? But I won't be able to get out until...
Jack paused. Isaac looked up at his only friend with tears streaming down his face.
Jack, I promise I'll come back for you as soon as I can.
Jack looked at the box, and then back at Isaac.
And I'll be right here waiting for you, kiddo.
Jack smiled as a single tear ran down his cheek. He walked over to the box with a puff of smoke, was sucked back in, unable to be free until once again opened. That night, Isaac was sent off to boarding school. For the first time, Laughing Jack felt what it was like to be lonely. Even when trapped in his box, Jack was able to see things go on around it. So each day, he waited for his friend to return. And each day, the room grew older and dustier. Laughing Jack's one purpose was to be Isaac's best friend for life, and now he waits day after day, month after month, to reunite with his special friend. Isaac's parents still lived in the house, but never came to the upstairs room. The only thing that made their presence known was when Jack would hear their fighting. And still, Jack's life became one of solitude, loneliness, and disappointment. As years went by, Jack's once vibrant colors began to fade into a monochrome blur of pitch-black void and stark white emptiness. Trapped all alone, eternal and hopeless. 13 years passed until the night Isaac's father came home particularly drunk and got into an argument with his wife as per usual. Things escalated to physical violence once again, however this time she didn't get back up. Isaac's father had beaten his wife to a dead, bloody pulp and was sentenced to hang at the gallows the next day. With both his parents dead, this meant that now 20-year-old Isaac inherited the dusty old house, the one that he had spent the earlier half of his childhood in. Laughing Jack was quite surprised when he heard his old friend's footsteps walking up the stairs to the attic room for the first time in 13 years. However, it was not the reunion that Jack had hoped for. Isaac looked different. Not only was he older, but he also seemed to possess this odd, grim look on his face. No longer was he the hopeful and curious young boy Jack first met all those years ago. Jack eagerly awaited Isaac's releasing him from the prison that he had waited in for so many years, but still, Jack's box sat there untouched and unnoticed on the shelf in the corner of the room with all the other dusty, unwanted knickknacks. Isaac had completely forgotten about his old friend, dismissed as some sort of early childhood fabrication. Surprisingly, this made Laughing Jack feel nothing. He was hollow. 13 years of waiting and disappointment left the monochrome clown void of sorrow and self-pity. Jack remained in his box, colorless and without emotion. The next day, Isaac went off to work at his job as an upholsterer. doing furniture repairs for the good people of London. Jack waited in captivity. Hours later, a drunken Isaac returned home and stumbled up the stairs to his room, but this time, he had a friend with him. It was a lady friend Isaac had picked up at the bar earlier that evening. She was beautiful, with flowing blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a smile that could make hearts melt. Laughing Jack's attention was drawn to Isaac's guest.
Who's this? A new friend? Why does Isaac need new friends? I thought I was Isaac's only friend.
Jack thought to himself from within his hellish confinement. Isaac and his lady friend sat down in the bed and chatted about life in London. Isaac made a joke about the weather, and they both laughed. Laughing Jack hissed with envy over Isaac's new friend. Isaac and the girl looked deeply into each other's eyes as they leaned in for a kiss, locking lips with a passionate swirling of tongues in one another's mouth. Jack was perplexed by the strange display of affection, for he had never seen kissing before. As the kissing grew more intense, Isaac ran his hand along the girl's smooth thigh and up her dress. However, his guest just brushed his hand away. Isaac was persistent, though, and once again ran his hand up along her smooth thigh and up her skirt, this time placing his hand upon her silk undergarments. The woman took great displeasure with Isaac's sexual advancement and pushed Isaac's hand away before delivering a hard smack across his face. Isaac's eyes darkened as he glared at the woman. His once drunken passion turned into booze-filled anger. The woman's heart sped up as she saw Isaac's face boil with rage.
"Stupid whore,"
Isaac yelled as he smashed his fist into the girl's face, and Laughing Jack's eyes widened as he witnessed long streaks of red liquid gushing from the girl's nose.
What game is this?
His eyes averted to such violent sights. Isaac firmly clutched the girl's wrists with one hand as he tore her underwear off with the other. The terrified girl tried to fight back, but Isaac was overpowering her. He roughly fondled her breast before savagely grabbing her hair and forcing his tongue down the sobbing woman's throat, who responded by chomping down as hard as she could on his tongue. Jack watched with wide and curious eyes as his old friend released his new playmate and clutched his mouth as it filled with warm red blood. The frightened girl fell off the bed and dropped down on the floor as she scurried toward the exit. Isaac quickly lurched forward and was able to catch his fleeing plaything by the end of her dress. Reaching back, he wielded a lead candlestick off the nightstand beside him, and with all of his might, bashed the back of the young woman's head, which burst open like a ripe watermelon. Thick blood splattered across the room as the girl's body convulsed on the ground for several seconds before going completely still. Blood was everywhere. Some droplets even managed to get onto Laughing Jack's box. He was very much enjoying the show. For the first time in 13 years, a smile began to creep across Laughing Jack's face. And all of a sudden, a chuckle escaped his cold lips. Then another, and another, until Jack was cackling and howling with laughter from inside the sealed box.
What a wonderfully fascinating game,
Jack thought as he watched the motionless girl's golden blonde hair flow red with blood. As the adrenaline began to mellow, Isaac realized he had to dispose of the body. He picked up the girl's lifeless corpse and plopped it on the bed. He then left the room, closing the door behind him and locking it before leaving the house. He returned almost a full day later and re-entered the room, bringing with him a metal garbage can and his bag of upholstery tools from work. He then cleared everything off the wooden desk on the wall opposite the door, and then dragged the bed with bloody corpse into the middle of the room. This not only gave Isaac room to work, but it also gave Laughing Jack a front row seat to the whole spectacle. Jack watched with a big, unfading grin as Isaac played his new game with his soiled corpse. And once Isaac was all set up, he got to work. First, he dumped out the contents of his big black tool bag onto the work table beside him. An assortment of knives, hammers, pliers, and other tools were now laid out before him. His first pick was a curved upholstery knife, which he used to carefully skin the body. That skin was then placed on the rack to be stretched and turned into leather. Once that was put in its place, Isaac then used a handsaw to saw off the arms and legs and head, disturbing the home of several families of maggots in the process. After filling the garbage can with bleach and other vile chemicals, he submerged the limbs until the meat was stripped from the bones. Isaac fished the bones out of the soupy corpse juice and placed them on the work table. Then, in the cover of night, he brought the trash can outside and dumped the rotten remains into the London sewers to be swept away into the harbor. For the next 3 days, Laughing Jack watched with wonderment as the inspired Isaac crafted the once human anatomy into a grotesque armchair abomination. The femur was made into the back legs of the chair, while the tibia, with the feet still attached, of course, were made into the front chair legs. A wooden frame was used for the base and backing of the chair. However, the rim of the backing was crafted using the spinal column. The arm bones were used as the arms of the chair and were fastened in place by some ribs. The now leathery flesh was sewn into the seat and backing of the chair, and the golden blonde hair was braided into a lining for the base. Atop this armchair from hell sat the skull that once belonged to the girl who had the golden blonde hair, the sapphire eyes, and the smile that could melt hearts. Isaac was quite pleased with his work, and Laughing Jack, too, was impressed by his old playmate's profound creativity. After that night, Isaac never touched another drop of alcohol again, for he now possessed a much more macabre thirst. In the following weeks, Isaac made several improvements to his little workshop of horrors. He removed the mattress from the bed and put a row of thick wooden planks in its place, and then he fastened arm and leg restraints to the bottom and sides. This would mean that he would be able to entertain his guests for longer periods without them trying to be rude and escape. Isaac needed only one final thing before planning another grotesque party. He worked on it for a week straight, hand carving it out of wood, and after a coat of white paint was applied, Isaac's creation was complete. It was a wooden mask, resembling something one would wear at a Venetian masquerade ball. It had a furrowed brow and a long troll-like nose, and would allow him to strike fear in the hearts of his beloved guests. With his new face complete, and the room transformed into a bloody murder nest, it was finally time for Isaac Lee Grossman to bring home a new playmate. The following night, Laughing Jack watched as the masked Isaac Grossman stomped up the stairs, carrying with him a large burlap sack with his newest guest writhing within. He dumped the bag out on his torture bed, and out plopped a bound, gagged, and very frightened young boy. Isaac quickly undid the boy's bindings and held him down as he restrained his hands and feet to the steel frame. Tears streamed endlessly down the boy's helpless little face as Isaac laid out his tools on the workbench. Isaac returned wielding a pair of rusty pliers, and wasting no time, he slid the bottom jaw of the pliers under the boy's fingernail on his right index finger and clamped it tightly. The child's eyes quivered as he began muttering through his gag, begging Isaac to let him go, and Isaac smirked.
Guys, I think I'm gonna wrap it up relatively soon. I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do tonight. I've got to finish this stuff on RuneScape. More importantly, I may work on the illustrations a little bit tonight. And I also may work on a roadmap for my work for the next month, and I've got to update Patreon. If I don't, I'm gonna feel bad. But let me put on music right quick. We're going back from what we were listening to this. Okay, let's find somebody to raid. Okay, well, nobody to raid tonight, so we're just gonna go ahead and call it. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.